Hey everyone! Before the wildflowers bloom in Willow Ridge and most folks have had their first sip of morning coffee, a hidden struggle is already unfolding beneath the roots of an old granite outcrop. In the hush before dawn, a mother bobcat fights for her newborns' lives, while one tiny kitten, born with a cleft palate, clings to hope where nature offers little mercy. And just when it seems the wild will claim him, fate takes an extraordinary turn. A coyote mother named Rosie makes a choice that will rewrite every rule of survival. If you've ever wondered what true compassion looks like, or how even the smallest, most fragile among us can change hearts, this story is for you. Share your thoughts below. Like or subscribe if this story speaks to you. And let's step into a world where kindness, against all odds, finds a way. Deep within the gnarled roots of a granite outcrop, a mother bobcat lay curled in the darkness. Her breathing was heavy, her fur damp from the effort of giving birth. The den was barely more than a hollow, sharp with the earthy scent of soil and old leaves, lit only by slivers of light slipping through cracks above. As the first rays of dawn touched Willow Ridge, she nudged 4 newborn kittens into a huddle, cleaning them with swift, practiced strokes. 3 of the kittens squirmed with surprising strength, their tiny mouths seeking warmth and milk. The 4th, though, was different, smaller, quieter. While the others pressed forward eagerly, this one struggled just to lift his head. His fur was thin, and his breaths came in short, halting gasps. He didn't have the robust roundness of his siblings. Instead, his mouth gaped oddly, revealing a narrow cleft in his upper palate. It made nursing almost impossible. Every time he tried to latch on, more milk spilled than he swallowed. The mother bobcat, still panting, paused. She nuzzled the runt, licking his face and chest, warming his fragile body against her own. For a moment, her eyes lingered on him, wide, golden, full of ancient wisdom and worry. Nature is neither cruel nor kind. It simply is. But in that small, hidden cave, a fierce protectiveness stirred. She bent her head low, nudging the kitten's nose toward her belly again, determined to give him every chance. Outside, the wind shifted. Somewhere on the ridge, a hawk screamed, circling. The air held the scents of pine sap, cold water, and something sharper. Danger, always just a breath away. Hours passed in uneasy quiet. The stronger kittens nursed greedily, their bellies swelling. The runt, later to be named Milo, grew weaker as the sun rose and fell. Each feeding was a battle, every swallow a victory paid for with energy he could hardly spare. The mother bobcat, caught between instinct and hope, divided her care as best she could. But Milo slipped behind, his hunger carving deep lines beneath his eyes. On the second night, a late snowfall drifted down, dusting the entrance to the den with silver. The mother stretched her lean body across her kittens, shielding them. The others squeaked and kicked, but Milo barely moved, his breath frosted in the cold air. Still, he fought, licking what drops of milk he could, kneading his mother's belly with trembling paws. By the 3rd morning, the difference was unmistakable. Milo's siblings mewled with strength, already practicing their tiny claws on one another, clumsy and fierce. Milo only watched, half hidden by the others, his movements growing slower. Hunger gnawed at him from the inside out, but some spark kept him trying, even as exhaustion made his head swim. Each time his mother licked his head, he rallied just a little. Each time her tail curled around him, he burrowed in, soaking up warmth he could not create for himself. But there are no guarantees in the wild. No promises, no comfort. Even the softest mothers cannot shield their young from the cold logic of survival. The research cameras hidden by biologists flickered quietly in the dark, recording every struggle, every tiny triumph, every sign of weakness. Somewhere, Dr. Laura Green, head scientist at the Willow Ridge Reserve, watched the flickering images with growing concern, noting the odds stacked against the little one. That afternoon, as the sun dipped low, shadows stretched across the den. Milo's mother returned from a quick hunt, her coat flecked with mud. She dropped a half-eaten mouse by the den's edge, then hurried inside to check her young. She cleaned them all, lingering once more on Milo, her tongue slow, her gaze soft, but full of doubt. She knew. Nature always knows. Night fell fast. Somewhere on the slope, a coyote yipped, and the mother stiffened. She drew her kittens closer, every muscle ready to spring, to fight, to flee if need be. Milo pressed his nose into her fur, seeking the heartbeat he'd known since the first moments of life. But as the wind howled outside, a quiet desperation crept in. Milo's future, uncertain from his very first breath, was already balancing on the edge of possibility. The world outside the den was wide and unforgiving. Inside, there was love, but not enough milk, not enough strength, and not enough time. Still, even as darkness closed around them, Milo's stubborn heart kept beating. In the wild, survival is measured not by size or strength alone, but by the fierce, improbable will to live, sometimes in the smallest and most fragile of bodies. And so, as the moon rose over Willow Ridge, a little bobcat with a crooked mouth and a will of iron faced his first night in a world that did not want him. The story of Milo had begun, not with a roar, but with a fragile gasp, a mother's fierce love, and the first uncertain promise of hope. Twilight at Willow Ridge brings with it a subtle shift in the air. The colors of the sky deepen to bruised purple and orange, and shadows spill like ink over the rocky hills. In these hours, when the line between safety and danger blurs, every creature moves with heightened caution. The wind itself seems to whisper warnings, and even the birds fall quiet. Inside the den, Milo's world was shrinking. The air felt heavier each hour, his siblings pressing closer together, their bellies round and full from days of easy nursing. Milo, by contrast, was thin, his fur patchy, his legs weak, his tiny body trembling with the effort of living. Still, every time his mother nudged him, he tried. The scent of her fur was both a comfort and a call to action, but each feeding ended with more hunger than before. The milk dribbled down his jaw, sticky and cold, never quite filling him up. That evening, the peace was shattered. A low growl outside, barely a rumble at first, set the mother bobcat's ears on edge. Coyotes. Their voices carried over the ridge, harsh and hungry. The mother bristled, her muscles tensing, her instincts burning bright. The den, so safe in the quiet morning, now felt exposed, a trap waiting to be sprung. She made her decision in an instant. Survival in the wild is about quick choices, no room for hesitation. With a flurry of movement, she gathered her 3 strongest kittens by the scruffs of their necks, one after another, her jaws gentle but unyielding. Each time she hesitated over Milo. His small body, curled at her feet, barely responded to her touch. His eyes open just a sliver, reflecting the golden glow of the fading sun. She tried. She licked his face, nuzzled him with growing desperation, urging him to move. But Milo was spent. The energy to lift his head had been used up hours before. His siblings squeaked and squirmed, ready for flight. Milo just lay there, breathing shallow, his little heart fluttering like a leaf in the wind. Outside, the growls grew louder. Dust swirled at the entrance as the mother darted away with her third kitten, glancing back, torn. But the logic of the wild is simple and cruel. Save what you can. Hope for the best. She disappeared into the thick underbrush, her tail a silent flag vanishing in the dusk. Milo was left alone. The den that once felt crowded and warm now felt enormous and cold. The ground was damp. The fading warmth of his mother's body lingered just long enough to remind him of what he had lost. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, from the entrance, a shadow loomed, a coyote's silhouette, ears sharp, nose twitching. Panic welled up inside Milo, but his body was too weak to run. He tried to cry out, a sound so soft it was barely more than a whimper. The coyote paused, sniffing the air, but was distracted by the movement of the mother bobcat in the distance. With a low bark, it turned away, racing after the hope of an easier meal. Milo was spared, but the world felt suddenly colder. He lay there, barely moving, as the last light faded. His cries, muffled by his deformity, drifted through the rocks, a thin thread of sound that went unheard by most of the wild. But hidden research cameras, set by Dr. Laura Green and her team, caught every moment. They watched helplessly as Milo struggled, noting the heartbreak of nature's decisions. Dr. Green, sitting in her small monitoring station miles away, pressed her hand to her mouth, feeling the weight of helplessness settle over her shoulders. As night deepened, the cold crept in. Milo's tiny body shivered uncontrollably. He curled tighter, trying to make himself smaller, safer. Hunger clawed at his insides, and his mouth throbbed with pain from repeated failed attempts to nurse. The sounds of the night, howls, the rustling of rodents, the sudden flap of an owl's wings, grew louder, more ominous. Each noise made his heart pound, even as his strength ebbed. Hours passed. The moon climbed high, silvering the rocks. Milo's breathing slowed, his cries dwindling to occasional pitiful squeaks. Somewhere nearby, the coyote pack gave up their chase, slinking back into the darkness. The world seemed vast, indifferent, uncaring. Yet even alone, Milo refused to surrender completely. There was a stubbornness in his eyes, a flicker of something that refused to let go. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe it was hope, thin as it was. Every few minutes he shifted position, trying to find warmth, trying to remember the feeling of his mother's fur. The cameras recorded everything, the way his sides heaved with each breath, the way his nose twitched, searching for any familiar scent. When he could, he pressed his cheek to the cool earth, listening to the vibrations of the ground, the faint reminders that life carried on around him, even as his world had collapsed. Dawn was still hours away. The darkness pressed down, heavy and relentless. But Milo's will, fragile, flickering, burned on. Sometimes the most heartbreaking moments in the wild are not the acts of violence, but the quiet ones, the choices forced by survival, the sound of a single lost voice in the night. As Milo's cries echoed over the rocks, it was as if the whole of Willow Ridge held its breath, waiting to see whether the little stranger's story would end before it ever truly began. And so, in that uncertain twilight, a frail kitten lay on the edge of life and death, caught between the memory of warmth and the reality of cold. His struggle was unseen by most, but somewhere someone was watching, and hope against all odds had not yet died. Night pressed heavy over Willow Ridge, turning every hollow into a pool of shadow and every whisper of wind into a threat. Milo, the runt left behind, shivered beneath the low tangle of branches at the edge of the den. The stones radiated the last hints of daytime warmth, but it wasn't enough to hold back the creeping cold that wormed its way into his bones. For hours, he lay curled in a tight ball, muscles aching from exhaustion, his breath puffing in shaky clouds that vanished as quickly as they formed. Hunger was a constant drumbeat, throbbing in his belly, sharper now that his siblings and mother were gone. There was no comfort left, only the bite of the wind and the scratch of dirt against his paws. The moon had risen, its cold light spilling across the wild grasses and bare rocks, painting everything in shades of silver and blue. The world seemed impossibly large. Milo was painfully aware of his own smallness. He pressed himself further beneath a sagging frond, wishing for the warmth of fur and milk, for the solid reassurance of another heartbeat close to his own. His mouth ached, the cleft in his palate raw and sore from hours of failed nursing. He licked his lips, desperate for moisture. In the darkness, he pressed his nose to a broad, dew-covered leaf, tongue flicking out to capture the drops that clung to its surface. The water was shockingly cold, but it soothed the dryness in his throat, at least for a moment. Each drop was a victory, won through stubbornness and pain. The night was full of sounds, mice skittering through the undergrowth, the distant call of an owl, the rustle of something larger moving just beyond sight. Every new noise sent a jolt through Milo's body. He flattened himself to the earth, heart pounding. For all his frailty, his senses were sharp. The instincts of a wild thing, the need to hide, to stay small and silent, were written in his blood. At times his mind wandered, drifting into half-dreams shaped by hunger and fear. He remembered his mother's warmth, the soft rumble of her purring as she cleaned his fur. He remembered the gentle nudge of his siblings as they jostled for milk, their bodies a living barrier against the cold. Now, those memories felt as distant as the stars, and just as impossible to reach. Time stretched and twisted in the darkness. Sometimes Milo would drag himself a few inches, seeking a new pocket of warmth or a softer patch of dirt. The effort left him trembling, but he refused to stay still. Movement was life. To give in to stillness was to surrender. Even as his strength waned, a fierce spark remained inside him, the raw, unreasoning will to survive. He tried everything his instincts suggested. He pressed his mouth to a root, hoping for the taste of sap. He pawed at the earth, digging up a fat grub and biting down, only to spit it out as pain shot through his mouth. Every attempt at nourishment ended in frustration, but Milo's stubbornness was stronger than his body's limits. Somewhere in the hours before dawn, the temperature dropped even lower. Frost began to gather along the edges of the leaves, sparkling under the moonlight. Milo's shivers grew worse. He tucked his paws beneath him, pressing his chin to his chest, trying to make himself as small as possible. Every breath hurt, every muscle ached, but he refused to cry out again. It was no use. No one was coming. Yet, in those darkest moments, hope took on a different form. It wasn't a bright, shining thing. It was a dull ember, the kind that glows in the ashes long after the fire's gone out. Milo's will to live was quiet, but steady. He was not ready to let go. Not yet. Far away, the cameras set by Dr. Green and her team captured it all. The relentless struggle, the small acts of defiance against the cold. In the warmth of her office, Dr. Green leaned forward, drawn into the frail kitten's fight. "Come on, little guy," she whispered to the monitor, feeling every tremor and twitch as if it were her own. By the time the first edge of dawn stained the sky with pale pink, Milo's world had shrunk to the rhythm of his own heartbeat. Hunger gnawed at him, but so did a strange kind of pride. He had lasted through the night. When the first ray of sun touched his battered fur, he forced himself up, wobbling on uncertain legs, and licked the dew from another leaf. Nature is indifferent, but not always cruel. In that moment, Milo was both alone and a part of something larger, the endless, tangled story of survival that played out every day across Willow Ridge. He was a footnote, perhaps, a small tragedy in the making, but he was still here. He blinked in the growing light, squinting at the movement in the distance. He could hear the faint yip of a coyote, the rustle of rodents, the whisper of wings overhead. The world hadn't ended. It had simply moved on without him. Yet something inside Milo shifted. He felt it, a stubborn, fragile hope. If he could make it through one night, maybe he could make it through another. Maybe, just maybe, his story wasn't finished yet. As the sun crested the horizon, Milo lifted his head and took in the wild, indifferent beauty of Willow Ridge. Cold, hungry, and weak, he was still alive. And sometimes, that was enough to plant the first seed of hope. Dawn broke slow and gentle over Willow Ridge, a thin veil of mist hovering just above the dew-laden grass. The sky glowed with the soft promise of a new day, but to Milo, huddled and shivering beneath the tangled underbrush, it felt like just another challenge. Every muscle ached with cold and hunger. His mind drifted between waking and dreams, the pain and loneliness blending with flashes of distant memories. His mother's steady heartbeat, the warmth of siblings pressed tight, now lost to the wild. Somewhere nearby, a family of coyotes moved silently through the half-light, paws silent on the damp earth. Rosie, the mother of the pack, was the first to pick up the scent, something sharp and strange beneath the familiar tapestry of pine, soil, and water. She was lean and alert, eyes bright with the responsibility of caring for her own litter of pups nestled in a den not far away. Rosie paused, ears flicking as she listened for movement. At first she thought it must be a rabbit, or maybe a ground squirrel, but the cry that reached her was different, a faint, broken sound, muffled by weakness and fear. It tugged at something deep inside her, a chord she didn't expect to feel for anything outside her own family. Driven by curiosity, and by the maternal instinct that had guided her through countless dangers, Rosie followed the sound, moving slowly and cautiously. She could have turned away. In the wild, most animals ignored weakness in others. Survival often demanded it. But something made Rosie hesitate. Maybe it was the way the cry echoed her own pup's first mewling sounds. Maybe it was simply that, in that moment, compassion outweighed caution. She parted the low branches with her nose and found Milo, a tiny, battered bobcat kitten, eyes half open, breathing shallowly. He was nothing like her pups. His fur was spiky and thin, his mouth twisted by the cleft that had doomed him to this struggle. Yet Rosie didn't snarl or back away. Instead, she moved closer, lowering her body until she was almost nose to nose with the frail kitten. Milo's first instinct was to flinch, to draw back from the strange, unfamiliar scent. But he was too weak to move. He simply stared up, eyes glazed with exhaustion, and let out the softest, most hopeless mewl. Rosie's ears flattened for a moment, sensing his fear, and then, almost tenderly, she licked the dirt from his face. The gesture was gentle, instinctual. Milo shivered, the touch strange but comforting. Rosie's tongue was rough but warm, and for a fleeting moment, the world didn't seem so cold. She paused, cocked her head, and studied him. If anyone had been watching, they might have thought she was weighing a decision. whether to walk away, to end his suffering, or to do something far more remarkable. Somewhere not far off, a pair of magpies bickered over a broken eggshell. The world went about its business, indifferent to the drama unfolding beneath the brush. But for Milo, time seemed to slow. Rosie's scent, earthy and wild, filled his senses. He blinked, barely believing he was still alive. And then, in a moment that would be captured by the reserve's hidden cameras, Rosie did the unthinkable. She carefully slid her jaws beneath Milo's tiny body, not with the lethal intent of a predator, but with the same gentle grip she used to carry her own pups. Milo didn't struggle. He was beyond fear, beyond resistance. He simply let himself be lifted, dangling awkwardly as Rosie carried him through the maze of rocks and roots. The world spun by in a blur of movement and scent. Rosie's steady heartbeat vibrated through Milo's fragile frame. For the first time since being left behind, he felt cradled, not just by fur and flesh, but by something softer and stranger. A kindness that crossed the boundaries nature usually enforced. Rosie brought Milo back to her den, tucked deep beneath the twisted roots of a fallen pine. Her own pups greeted her return with yips and eager noses, wriggling for attention. She set Milo down gently beside them. The Coyote pups sniffed him with confusion, tails wagging uncertainly. Milo's scent was unfamiliar, but Rosie's acceptance was all the reassurance they needed. The pups pressed close, sharing their warmth as Rosie curled around them all. The den was chaos, whimpering, wriggling bodies fighting for a place at Rosie's belly. Milo, weak and bewildered, was pushed aside at first, but Rosie nudged him closer. She licked his head, careful and thorough, as if trying to erase the night's suffering. When the pups finished nursing, Rosie regurgitated a small bit of softened food, a coyote mother's way of feeding those too young or weak to eat solid meat. Milo, desperate, managed to lap at the offering. It wasn't much, but it was more than he'd had in days. Rosie's unexpected compassion became the den's new rhythm. She kept Milo close, tending to his wounds, guarding him from rough play when the pups grew too boisterous. At night, she curled her body around him, her heartbeat a steady reminder that he was not alone. Outside, the sun climbed higher, burning away the last traces of frost. The wilds of Willow Ridge had not grown kinder, but in one den, at least, the laws of nature bent just enough to let a stranger in. For the first time since being left behind, Milo slept without fear. His dreams were filled not with hunger or cold, but with the warmth of a new, unexpected family. For most wild creatures, boundaries are drawn in scent and instinct, separating kin from outsider, friend from threat. But inside Rosie's den, something miraculous began to take shape. A fragile truce between nature's expectations and a mother's boundless heart. Milo awoke to the sounds of coyote pups yipping and tumbling over one another. The den smelled different from his old home, musky, earthy, and thick with the sharp tang of pine needles and old bones. At first, confusion overwhelmed him. The coyote pups were bigger and bolder than his siblings had been, roughhousing with exuberance, biting at each other's ears and paws in play. Their fur was coarser, their tails bushier, but their eyes were bright with curiosity, not cruelty. Rosie moved among her young with practiced grace, tending first to her own, then to the newcomer. She checked Milo carefully, licking his ears, cleaning his wounds, her touch both brisk and gentle. When her pups finished nursing, she circled back to Milo, nudging him until he raised his head. It took a few tries before he understood. Milo's cleft palate made suckling impossible, but Rosie had seen him struggle and found another way. Coyotes, especially mothers, often regurgitate softened food for their young, a behavior as ancient as the pack itself. Rosie crouched low, her sides heaving slightly, and deposited a small mound of partially digested rabbit and berries at Milo's paws. The smell was strong, but hunger overpowered hesitation. Milo sniffed, then lapped eagerly, his tongue moving awkwardly but determined. The food was soft enough for him to swallow, and though the process was messy, for the first time in days, his belly began to feel less hollow. Rosie licked his face after each mouthful, cleaning away stray bits and offering encouragement with gentle nudges. The coyote pups watched, puzzled but accepting, their tails wagging in sync. With each meal, Milo grew a little stronger. He learned the rhythms of the den, the jostling, the play, the quiet moments when Rosie curled everyone close and rested her head on her paws. He didn't have the energy to join the coyote pups in their wrestling matches, but they accepted him all the same, pressing close when they slept, sharing warmth in the cool earth hollow. Sometimes, when Rosie left to hunt, Milo would watch the den entrance, anxiety gnawing at him. The world outside still held dangers he couldn't imagine facing alone. But Rosie always returned, her coat dusted with morning dew, her mouth carrying food for everyone. Each time she greeted Milo first, nuzzling his cheek and reassuring him with her presence. Rosie's mate, a rangy male with a scar over one eye, returned less often, and when he did, he eyed Milo warily at first. But Rosie was firm. She stood over the Bobcat Kitten, tail high, refusing to let even her mate question the newcomer's place. Eventually, even he relented, accepting the kitten as another mouth to feed, another small life to protect. Days slipped by in this strange, uneasy peace. Milo's world, once defined by hunger and cold, slowly expanded. He watched as Rosie taught her pups the first lessons of survival, how to dig for grubs, how to pounce on fallen leaves, how to listen for the warning calls of jays and magpies. Sometimes Milo tried to mimic them, his own pounces clumsy, his leaps falling short. The pups would bark in delight, treating his attempts as a new game. At night, the den was filled with the steady rhythm of breathing, the warmth of bodies pressed together. Milo curled against Rosie's belly, lulled to sleep by the familiar heartbeat, the faint sense of earth and fur. He still missed his mother, her rough tongue, her soothing purr, but Rosie's care filled the emptiness in unexpected ways. The change in Milo did not go unnoticed. From her monitoring station, Dr. Green and her team watched the hidden cameras in awe. They'd expected the Bobcat Kitten's story to end in tragedy. Instead, they witnessed something rare and beautiful. The Coyote family's acceptance of Milo, his feeding, his slow gains in strength, became the talk of Willow Ridge. Word spread to the local school, where children followed the little stranger with hope and fascination. Sometimes, Rosie's care was not enough. There were days when Milo's feeding was clumsy, when he struggled to keep down even the softest morsels. On those days, Rosie was endlessly patient. She lay with him, cleaning him, encouraging him to try again. When the pups became too rough, she'd gently push them away, giving Milo space and quiet. The Coyote pups, too, adjusted. They stopped pushing him aside at mealtime, sometimes even nudging food toward him with their noses. One pup, a bold little female, became his shadow, lying beside him when he was too tired to play, guarding him when Rosie was away. The bond was real, unexpected, and all the stronger for being forged in adversity. Milo still faced challenges. His body would never be as strong as the others. Sometimes, the pain in his mouth flared, leaving him whimpering in the dark. But for the first time in his short, difficult life, Milo belonged. He had a family. He had warmth. He had a chance. The wild outside Rosie's den remained as ruthless as ever, but inside something extraordinary was unfolding. Against all odds, a bobcat kitten with a crooked mouth and a will to live had found a new place, not by the rules of nature, but by the mercy of a mother's heart. While life inside Rosie's den unfolded with a steady, hopeful rhythm, another kind of watchfulness took hold outside, a more human gaze, peering into the mystery of Willow Ridge through the quiet lens of technology. High in the reserve's monitoring station, nestled between rows of computer screens and glowing monitors, Dr. Laura Green and her team of wildlife biologists followed every moment of Milo's unlikely journey. The hidden cameras, disguised in the twisted roots and scattered stones, transmitted a living record of the den's daily life. For Dr. Green, each image was both a miracle and a puzzle. Here was a bobcat kitten, unmistakably marked by his cleft palate, not only surviving but thriving under the care of a wild coyote mother. The footage ran day and night, Rosie regurgitating food for Milo, the coyote pups cuddling him close, Milo's persistent attempts to join their play. In the reserve's community center, word of the little stranger spread fast. Photos and short video clips made their way to school groups and local residents. Soon, children filed in to watch the story unfold, their faces pressed to the glass, voices hushed in wonder as Milo appeared on the screen, smaller than the others, but just as alive, just as determined. Dr. Green, always practical, but never immune to wonder, found herself swept up by the unfolding drama. During her talks at the local elementary school, she held up pictures of Milo and Rosie, explaining to students how the wild sometimes defied the rules even scientists took for granted. "This is what we call an outlier," she'd say, pointing to the fuzzy image of Rosie licking Milo's face. "In nature, outliers don't usually get a second chance. But sometimes something extraordinary happens. Nature isn't just about survival of the fittest. Sometimes it's about compassion, too." The students listened with wide eyes, some even bringing in their own stuffed animals to root for Milo. Teachers incorporated the story into lessons about biology and empathy. The town's social media filled with updates. Little Stranger trended for days among local circles, and Dr. Green found herself fielding calls from nearby wildlife centers, all curious about this strange, hopeful chapter at Willow Ridge. In the den, Milo was unaware of his new fame. He simply lived, 1 hour at a time. But the scientists noticed small victories, a new steadiness in his gait, the spark of playfulness as he pawed at his foster siblings. Every clip, every still frame was studied and archived. They counted each time Rosie licked Milo's head or gently pushed food toward him, building a database of maternal behavior the textbooks had never described. Rosie, for her part, seemed unfazed by the attention of the invisible observers. Her focus remained on her brood, her own pups and the fragile kitten she had chosen as her own. When storms battered the ridge, she shielded them all, pressing close to keep the warmth in. When food was scarce, she always made sure Milo got his share, regurgitating softer morsels and watching carefully as he lapped them up. The coyote pups grew stronger each day, their games growing rowdier. Sometimes Milo managed to join their play, clumsy but persistent, swatting at tails or tumbling in the dust. Other times, he watched from the edge, content simply to belong. For the people of Willow Ridge, Milo's story became a point of unity. Families who'd never spoken before struck up conversations at the grocery store, sharing their hopes for the kitten's survival. The local paper ran a front-page story. Mother Coyote adopts Bobcat Kitten, a miracle at Willow Ridge. Letters poured in, some from children, others from adults who saw their own struggles reflected in Milo's fight. On a chilly afternoon, the community center hosted a Milo Day. Children drew pictures of bobcats and coyotes, taping them up beside the monitors. Dr. Green gave a talk, her voice wavering with emotion as she described the bond between Rosie and Milo. "This is a story about more than survival," she told the gathered families. "It's about what happens when we choose to care for the vulnerable, to make room for someone different. Nature has her rules, but sometimes the heart makes its own." Back at the den, the rhythms continued, feeding, playing, resting, unbroken by the attention outside. Rosie's instincts, shaped by thousands of years, blended with a new kind of wisdom born from the moment she carried Milo to safety. In the wild, such choices were rare, but in Rosie's den, kindness had become a law unto itself. Every night, as dusk fell and the reserve grew quiet, Dr. Green sat by the monitors, watching Milo curl against Rosie's side, his tiny chest rising and falling in sleep. She couldn't help but wonder how long the magic would last, how long this delicate web of compassion and survival could hold. But for now, as community and science watched together, Milo's journey was a living testament to the wild's capacity for surprise. Every day he lived was a day the world grew just a little bigger, a little more mysterious, and a little more hopeful. As the days lengthened into golden stretches of spring, Rosie's den became a small world of routine and surprises. Milo, under the Coyote mother's fierce care, continued to defy the odds. His fur thickened, his eyes grew brighter, and sometimes he even managed a feeble pounce at the shadows that danced along the den's walls. The Coyote pups, bolder now, included him in their play, nudging him gently or curling around him when he tired. But for every victory, there were new challenges, a rhythm of hope and heartbreak that kept the scientists, the community, and even Rosie herself in a constant state of worry and wonder. Feeding was always a struggle for Milo. Rosie had learned to soften food for him, regurgitating small, wet morsels so he could manage with his cleft palate. Sometimes, Milo lapped up every bite eagerly, his tail flicking with satisfaction. Other days he gagged, unable to swallow more than a few mouthfuls. The pain in his mouth would flare without warning, leaving him whimpering quietly while the Coyote pups looked on, confused and concerned. There were days when Milo's siblings, growing stronger and more rambunctious, crowded him away from Rosie, their hunger blind to the kitten's weakness. On those days, Rosie intervened, nuzzling Milo back into the circle, but she could not always stop the rough-and-tumble energy that came with a growing pack. More than once, Milo was jostled and sent tumbling, his small body knocked into the den wall, his breath coming in short, frightened bursts. He never complained. He would simply pick himself up, eyes shining with that same stubbornness, and try again. Outside, storms swept over Willow Ridge, drenching the earth in rain and forcing Rosie and her brood to huddle close for warmth. These days were hardest of all. Food grew scarce. Rosie ranged further and further in search of prey, leaving the den for long, anxious hours. The pups grew restless and hungry. Milo, smaller and more fragile than the rest, felt the absence of Rosie's care most of all. Once, after a particularly long absence, Milo grew too weak to move when Rosie returned, his sides heaving, eyes glazed and distant. Rosie dropped her catch, frantic, licking Milo's face over and over, trying to coax him back. The Coyote pups circled close, whining with confusion. Dr. Green, watching from the monitors, held her breath, fearing that this would be the end. But Milo's spirit was not so easily broken. Somehow, through the haze of pain and hunger, he rallied, taking slow, trembling licks of the softened food Rosie offered, his heartbeat steadying as warmth and nourishment returned. The reserve staff worried endlessly, the community following every update with a mixture of dread and hope. School children sent drawings and letters, "Hang in there, Milo," and neighbors left out bowls of water and messages of encouragement at the wildlife center. Everyone, it seemed, was invested in the fate of the little stranger. But nature is never swayed by hope alone. Milo's body remained fragile. His growth lagged behind the Coyote pups. He tired quickly, sometimes falling asleep in the middle of a play session, his body curling in on itself as exhaustion claimed him. There were nights when he whimpered in his sleep, haunted by the pain that never fully left him. Rosie never gave up. She grew fierce when Milo was threatened or excluded, her maternal instincts sharpened by weeks of struggle. At times, she would separate Milo from the others, tucking him into the warmest corner of the den and lying beside him until he drifted into a peaceful sleep. Her care was unwavering, but even Rosie could not erase the limits nature had set. Dr. Green and her team kept careful records, noting every gain and every setback. They debated how much to intervene, whether to step in and try to help, or to let nature run its course. In the end, they chose to watch and learn, recognizing that Rosie's wild care, however imperfect, was part of a story far larger than any one animal's fate. Some days brought hope. Milo would join the Coyote pups in a chase, tumbling over roots and leaves, his laugh, a rough, breathy sound, bubbling up as he forgot his pain, even for a moment. On those days, the den was filled with life and light, a reminder of the wild's endless capacity for joy, even amid struggle. Other days were darkened by fear. A fox prowled near the den one afternoon, drawn by the scent of the pups. Rosie returned in time to chase it off, but the close call rattled the entire family. Milo, ever sensitive, became jumpier, his eyes wide and wary for days after. Through it all, the wild community watched, a web of scientists, school children, neighbors, and online followers, all rooting for Milo's fragile hope. His story became a lesson played out in real time, that sometimes the fight for survival is not about who is strongest, but about who refuses to give up, who finds family in the unlikeliest of places, and who is willing to risk heartbreak for a chance at belonging. As the sun set each evening, painting Willow Ridge in warm orange and gold, Milo would curl up beside Rosie and the pups, his tiny body pressed close to hers. He knew, somewhere deep inside, that tomorrow would bring new struggles, new battles to fight. But tonight, he belonged. Tonight, he was home. And sometimes, in the wild, that was everything. Spring deepened over Willow Ridge, and with every week, Milo's story stretched far beyond the mouth of Rosie's den. In homes, classrooms, and park offices, people followed his progress, the drama of his struggles, the gentle heroism of Rosie, and the uncertain hope that every new day brought. To the scientists, it became more than just a field observation. To the community, it was a living parable unfolding before their eyes. At the reserve's visitor center, Dr. Laura Green set up a projector and invited the local school children for an assembly. They sat cross-legged on the wooden floor, eyes wide with anticipation. The story had taken hold of their hearts. Dr. Green clicked through the slideshow, each image sparking new whispers of awe. A bobcat kitten sleeping nestled between coyote pups, Rosie licking Milo's tiny face, Milo lapping softened food from Rosie's patient mouth. She paused at a photo of Milo trying to play with his foster siblings, his stance awkward, body still thin but tail high with determination. "This," Dr. Green said, voice softening, "is something we never expected to see in the wild. A mother coyote caring for a bobcat kitten, one with a deformity no less. Nature, as we often say, can be harsh, but it can also surprise us with moments of kindness." A girl near the front raised her hand. "Why did Rosie help him if he's not her real pup?" Dr. Green smiled. "That's the big question, isn't it? In science, we look for patterns, reasons why animals do what they do. Sometimes, though, instinct and emotion blur. Rosie heard Milo's cry and chose to help. Maybe it was her maternal instinct. Maybe it was simple compassion. But it shows us something important. Empathy isn't just a human trait. Animals, too, can choose kindness, even for someone different." In the weeks that followed, Milo's struggle became a lesson for more than just the students. Rosie's patience and acceptance became a symbol in community meetings, church groups, even family dinner tables. The story made its way into local news and social media, where followers from far beyond Colorado began to root for the little stranger. People sent in messages. "My daughter was born with a cleft palate just like Milo. We're cheering for him every day." Others wrote of their own experiences as outsiders, or of the times they'd been cared for when they felt weak and alone. Milo's journey became a thread that stitched together the private heartbreak and quiet hopes of strangers. Back in the wild, the lessons played out in quieter ways. The coyote pups grew larger, more boisterous with each day. They could leap and chase, darting through the brush with the surety of those born healthy and whole. Milo tried to join, sometimes collapsing in the effort, but always picked himself up and tried again. The pups accepted his limits, never mocking or abandoning him, their play adjusting naturally to include their weaker brother. Rosie taught them all, not just how to survive, but how to look after one another. If a pup yipped in distress, she was there in an instant. If Milo struggled, she nudged him forward but never left him behind. The wild had not gone soft, but Rosie's den was a pocket of mercy, proof that nature's laws could bend, if only a little, to make space for the vulnerable. Dr. Green often spoke at the community center, using Milo's story as a way to talk about adaptation and empathy. "We're taught to believe only the strong survive," she'd say, her gaze sweeping the room. "But nature is more complicated. Sometimes those who seem weak have a stubbornness, a courage that inspires everyone around them. And sometimes it's the strong who show their strength, not by winning, but by caring for the weak." She told how Rosie's actions challenged even her own scientific expectations. "Biology says one thing, but life in the wild is more flexible than we realize." By nurturing Milo, Rosie has changed how we understand coyote behavior. She's shown us that compassion isn't weakness. It's another kind of strength. The story resonated especially with the children. They drew pictures of Milo and Rosie, taping them to the community board, and invented games where the little stranger always found a family in the end. The local library hosted a reading circle, inviting kids to share stories about times they'd felt left out or had helped someone in need. Milo's journey rippled outward, encouraging quiet acts of kindness. A neighbor bringing soup to a sick friend, a classroom raising money for children with disabilities, a family adopting an abandoned dog from the shelter. Each small act was, in some way, an echo of the compassion playing out in Rosie's den. For Dr. Green and the reserve staff, the lesson was humbling. Scientific detachment gave way to emotional investment. They rooted for Milo in every setback and celebrated every small victory. In team meetings, they analyzed Rosie's maternal strategies, their data laced with hope and wonder. Milo's struggles continued, but now they were witnessed, honored, and even celebrated. The wild remained indifferent to his suffering, yet his story proved that indifference wasn't the only force at work in the world. Sometimes, a mother's love, a love that reached beyond blood, beyond species, could change the outcome, even if only for a little while. As the days warmed, Milo grew thinner, but his spirit never dimmed. He became a symbol of stubborn hope, of belonging against the odds, and of the lesson that true courage is often found in the most fragile among us. Rosie's care, the pup's acceptance, and the community's awe gave meaning to his struggle, making his short life something far larger than anyone could have imagined. And as Willow Ridge blossomed into summer, Milo's legacy was already taking root, in hearts and homes and in the wild places where, sometimes, kindness finds a way. Summer came quietly to Willow Ridge, bringing long, sun-soaked days and gentle, star-studded nights. The world outside Rosie's den pulsed with life. Grasshoppers leapt through tall grass, songbirds darted through the clear sky, and wildflowers blazed with color along the streams. The rhythms of the wild moved on, just as they always had. But inside the den, time felt suspended, revolving around the fragile heartbeat of one small, remarkable kitten. Milo's body grew thinner as the weeks went by, his eyes a little brighter, but his steps a little slower. He no longer tried to wrestle with the Coyote pups, content now to watch their games from the edge, his tail curled neatly around his paws. When he tired, Rosie was always there, settling her head over his back, the steady rise and fall of her breathing a comfort he had come to depend on. The pups, larger and wilder now, still accepted Milo without question, occasionally dropping a scrap of food in front of him, or curling around him as if to say, "You're one of us." Rosie's care never faltered. She cleaned him, shared her food, and guarded him from the roughest play. Even the other adult coyotes had come to accept Milo as part of their own. The den's laws had been rewritten, at least for this brief and beautiful summer. But as the days passed, it became clear, to Rosie, to Dr. Green, and to the community who followed Milo's journey, that his body was not built for a long life in the wild. The feeding, always difficult, became nearly impossible. Milo struggled to swallow even the softest bits of food. The pain from his cleft palate was unrelenting, and his energy waned. He slept longer, and sometimes seemed to dream with his eyes open, as if halfway between the world of the living and the world beyond. Still, Milo never stopped fighting. Every morning, he dragged himself to Rosie's side. Every evening, he purred softly as the pups nuzzled in close. If he was afraid, he never showed it. He accepted each new day with the same quiet stubbornness that had carried him through so much already. One night, as the heat of summer pressed down and the stars blazed overhead, Milo curled into the warmest corner of the den. Rosie licked his head. The pups pressed close, and the night sang with the soft calls of distant owls and crickets. As the moon rose high above Willow Ridge, Milo's breath slowed, then stilled. Surrounded by the family who had chosen him, the little stranger slipped away, peaceful at last. The loss rippled through the den. Rosie lingered by Milo's body, licking him one final time before nudging the pups away. The next morning, she sat at the den's entrance, eyes fixed on the horizon, as if mourning in her own wild way. The pups were restless, uncertain, their play subdued for days. Even the other coyotes, usually indifferent to loss, seemed to sense the shift. Word spread quickly through the reserve. Dr. Green and her team watched the last moments on camera, tears welling in their eyes. She shared the news at the community center, her voice trembling. "Milo is gone," she told them, "but what he leaves behind is more powerful than any single life." For the people of Willow Ridge, Milo's death was not just a tragedy. It was a celebration of the improbable, a reminder of what kindness and acceptance could create. Letters poured in, some offering condolences, others sharing stories of loss, love, and unexpected courage. Children taped new drawings of Milo to the windows at the visitor center, their pictures filled with hearts, flowers, and a little bobcat surrounded by his coyote family. Dr. Green wrote an article for the local paper, the words flowing from her heart as much as her mind. "We spend our lives searching for answers in the wild," she wrote. "But sometimes the wild offers lessons we never thought to ask for. Milo's story is not about how long he lived, but about the love and belonging he found in the unlikeliest of places. His short life changed us, reminded us that survival is not only for the strongest, but sometimes for those who are most loved." In the weeks that followed, Milo's story became a touchstone for the reserve. The staff hung a small photograph of him in the monitoring station, a silent tribute to the courage and compassion they had witnessed. School children planted a wildflower garden near the visitor center, calling it Milo's Meadow, so that every spring his memory would bloom alongside the new life at Willow Ridge. Rosie and her pups moved on, as wild things must. The den was quieter without Milo, but his presence lingered, in the way Rosie now paused to comfort any pup that cried, in the way the pack welcomed a lost fox cub later that year, in the way every howl at twilight seemed to carry a note of longing and hope. The community, too, felt the change. Acts of kindness multiplied, neighbors checking on one another, children befriending the lonely, strangers reaching out to comfort those in pain. Milo's legacy became a quiet revolution, reframing how people thought about strength, survival, and the value of a life. Dr. Green, reflecting on the summer's events, shared her thoughts with anyone who would listen. "What Milo taught us is simple but profound," she said. "That the measure of a life isn't its length, but the compassion it inspires. That the wild is not just a place of tooth and claw, but a place where love, too, can change the world." And so, even as the days grew shorter and the wild prepared for another winter, the memory of the little stranger at Willow Ridge lived on, a legacy not of survival alone, but of the boundless possibilities of kindness. As summer faded and the gold of autumn settled over Willow Ridge, the days grew cooler and the nights crisp and bright. The world went on in its ancient, patient way. Geese arrowed south across the evening sky. Herds of deer threaded through tall grass, and somewhere, Rosie's coyote family prepared for the cold. The den where Milo had lived became just another hollow among many. Yet for those who had watched, cared, and learned, its memory glowed with something rare, a light that would not fade with the turning of the seasons. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, the Willow Ridge community gathered at the visitor center. The air was tinged with wood smoke, and the distant song of coyotes rolled across the hills like a blessing. Children clutched drawings of Milo and Rosie, Adults swapped quiet stories about times they'd witnessed compassion in their own lives. The reserve staff had set up a small bonfire and arranged benches in a wide half-circle, inviting everyone to share in a moment of remembrance. Dr. Laura Green stood at the front, the orange glow of the fire lighting her face, her voice warm and sure as she began to speak. "We're here tonight because of a little bobcat most of us never saw with our own eyes. Milo wasn't just a kitten. He was a question, a challenge, really. He made us wonder, what does it mean to belong? How do we measure the value of a life? And who decides who's worthy of love?" She paused, letting the words settle. All around, neighbors and friends leaned forward, listening, their faces open to the soft lessons carried on the autumn wind. "To me," Dr. Green continued, "Milo's story isn't just about a sickly bobcat and a mother coyote. It's proof that the wild, at its best, is full of unexpected tenderness. Rosie's love and Milo's fight remind us that even the smallest, the weakest, can change the world, if only for a short while." She looked out over the crowd, her gaze meeting the eyes of children, parents, old friends, and newcomers alike. If you've ever cared for someone, or something, different or fragile, then you know how much courage that takes. It's not always easy. Sometimes it hurts. But every act of kindness echoes far beyond what we can see. Milo's life, though brief, left us changed. He reminded us that there's room in the world for those who don't fit the mold, and that compassion is never wasted. As Dr. Green finished, a gentle hush fell over the group. For a moment, only the crackle of the fire and the distant sounds of Willow Ridge filled the silence. Then, slowly, hands began to rise, people eager to share their own stories. A boy with a shy smile spoke of helping an abandoned kitten he'd found behind his house. An elderly woman described the neighborhood children who raked her yard every fall without ever being asked. One by one, voices joined together, weaving a tapestry of small mercies and quiet bravery. The fire burned low as dusk turned to night, and Dr. Green offered one last invitation. "If you feel moved by Milo's story, I'd love for you to share it. Tell a friend, write a letter, or simply remember to look with kinder eyes at the world around you. Every time we share, every time we care, we keep these echoes of kindness alive." From that evening forward, Milo's legacy lived on in countless ways. The wildflower patch at the edge of the reserve, now officially named Milo's Meadow, bloomed brighter than ever as families visited to plant seeds in his memory. Teachers used his story as a lesson in empathy. Children played new games where even the slowest or smallest were never left behind. The Wildlife Center received more volunteers than ever, people wanting to help, to nurture, to become part of something hopeful. Rosie's den, now empty, was not forgotten. Scientists continued to watch for stories like hers, eager to learn what else the wild might reveal when viewed through the lens of compassion. And sometimes, in the quiet of early morning, hikers would pause near the old pine roots and listen for the faint echo of a purr or the memory of a mother's gentle care. For Dr. Green, the months that followed were filled with a quiet pride and a renewed sense of purpose. She wrote articles and gave interviews, always circling back to the lesson Milo had left behind, that the true heart of the wild is not just struggle and tooth and claw, but also grace, a space where love, however unlikely, can make all the difference. She often ended her talks with the same words she spoke that autumn night. Every story matters. Every act of kindness ripples outward, changing the world in ways we may never see. If you've ever loved something fragile, or felt yourself to be the little stranger, know that you are not alone. The wild remembers, and so do we. As the year turned and the first snows blanketed Willow Ridge, Milo's memory lingered like the hush before dawn, quiet, steadfast, and full of hope. And in every corner of the community, in every wild place where hearts were open, the lesson endured. Love makes a home for even the littlest stranger, and in that home, miracles are possible. So if you felt inspired by Milo and Rosie's story, share it. Pass it on to someone who needs a little hope tonight. Leave a comment, tell a friend, or simply notice the acts of wild kindness around you. For every time we tell the story, we keep its magic and its message alive.